Hey fans, this video is going to be looking at significant figures. It's going to introduce the concept of what a significant figure is and how to round to one significant figure. And then the rest of the videos in this playlist are going to be looking at how to round to two significant figures and rounding with zeros and nines. And if you can do that, you can do the rest of rounding with significant figures because you've got all the key skills you need. So first of all, let's just start with looking at why we round. Have a think of a couple of reasons. When do you round numbers in real life? I can think of an example where if you're buying stuff online or even in the shop, you wouldn't necessarily add up exactly the prices of things. For example, in a basket, if, for example, cereal costs £2.19 and biscuits might cost £1.87, and then you've got another tin of something costing, or a pack of tins costing £3.32, you may not add these up exactly. You might round these in your head and get a rough idea. You might round that to £2. You might round that to £2. You might round that to £3 and say, okay, roughly this is going to cost 3 plus 2 plus 2, £7. So this is a real life example. Another one is headlines or just normal discussions with how long something takes or how far something is. If something happened 30.78 miles outside of London, it wouldn't make much sense, or you wouldn't need to round that. You wouldn't need to give an exact value. You might just round it to 30. So these are real life examples, and there's probably a few more that you may have thought of, but let's look at what we mean by significant figures now. So before we do that, there's just a few important things to note. So a number is, well, you can see these examples here. These are all numbers. Fractions obviously count as well. And each number consists of digits. So the digits are the individual things in a number. So 1 is a digit, 2 is a digit, 5 is a digit. So this is a 4-digit number, and you can see the 4 digits here, and then here you can see each of these are individual digits. So when I refer to a digit, we're referring to a specific part in a number. The whole thing together is a number. Generally speaking though, we're quite loose with language, so I may say the number 5 in 4,525, but strictly speaking it should be the digit, the second digit. So in terms of rounding with significant figures, the first significant figure is the first non-zero digit in a number, and that's really important to remember, and I'll show you some examples in a second. And then the second significant figure is the digit after the first significant figure, and that can be 0. So the first significant figure can never be 0, but after that, second significant figure can be 0. So some examples here. The first significant figure in the first number is 2. The second significant figure is 4. In the second example, the first significant figure is 1. Second significant figure is 0. The first significant figure is 2. Second significant figure is 0. Now here, we've got 3 what we would call leading zeros. So they're zeros before the first non-zero digit. So these 3 are leading zeros, and they are important because we can't just write this as 5. That would be an entirely different number. But because you've got these leading zeros, the first significant figure is 5. That doesn't mean to say that these zeros are can be ignored, but it's just the 5 is the first significant one. And their second significant figure doesn't exist in this number. For the next example, the first significant figure is 2, second significant figure is 5, and then for the last example, first significant figure is 5, and the second significant figure is 0. There are third significant figures and fourth, etc., but we'll get to those later on in the playlist. Okay, so this is just an example here of first and second significant figures. Now, in this case, just in the examples that we've looked at as well, that 0 is important because it is acting as a placeholder. Again, we can't ignore that 0, but this is not the same. So we should say it's not equal to 23.5. You can't just ignore that 0. If there was a 0 afterwards, I can add as many zeros as I want here. Those don't actually change the value of this number. So these zeros we can ignore. These are called trailing zeros, but we're not going to really focus too much on these yet. You'll see they'll come into play later. But for now, you just need to be able to recognize what's the first significant figure. And then remember, some zeros are important placeholders. And remember to ignore leading zeros. Okay, so here again, in this example, you can see this is a leading 0, first significant figure, second significant figure. Leading 0, first significant figure, second significant figure. Now, for the first couple of examples, I have circled the first significant figure, and then that green circle is going to disappear after you've done a few examples. And what I want you to do is, this is how you're going to round to one significant figure. You're going to find the first significant figure, and then you are going to look at the place value. So the place value of this is, it's in the tens column. So essentially we're rounding this to the nearest 10. Now if you imagine a number line, the closest tens here is going to be between 20 and 30. And 22, this is just a rough sketch, is going to roughly belong here. 22 is closer to 20 rather than 30. So with this rounded to one significant figure, I'm going to do some wavy, that means roughly equal to, is roughly equal to 20, so one significant figure. And you're going to think of this the same way as you find the first significant figure, look at the place value, and then round to that what that place value asks you to. So let's do another example here. The first significant figure is this 2. It's in the tenths column. Now tenths, there's a few ways to write this. This is 0.1 or 1 over 10. Now I'm generally going to stick to decimals here. Normally we prefer fractions, but in this case we're rounding to the nearest 0.1. So on a number line, you can see 0.22 is closer to 0.2 rather than 0.3. So imagine the 0.1 times tables, or 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc. On a number line, 0.22 is closer to 0.2. So this would give you 0.2, and that's your answer. You should not be adding zeros at the end here. It's very important you leave any trailing zeros out of the answer, and you'll see why in a few more examples. So here, look at the place value of the significant figure and then round to that. So hopefully you figured out the 2 is in the hundreds column. So we're rounding to the nearest 100. So 100, 200, 300, 400, etc. So in this case, 280 is closer to 300 than it is to 200. And you can draw a number line like this if it helps you. I sometimes will, but generally if you're confident without it, that's fine as well. So 280 would be somewhere along here, and to one significant figure, this is going to be rounded to 300. Now, these zeros are important placeholders because we are rounding to the nearest 100, so those zeros are very important. You can't ignore those. And again, remember, a few more examples and you'll see why this is important. So round to one significant figure, have a go. Either write it down or do it in your head, and then I'm going to explain to you what the answer is here. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go with this. And now, these are two leading zeros, so we ignore them. The place value of this 2, well, this is in the units column, or the ones column. This is in the tenths column. This is in the hundredths column. So we're rounding to the nearest 0.01. So if you imagine a number line, we're going to have 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, 0.04, and so on. Now, I didn't need to write all of those out. There's actually, I can see that this number is going to be in between these two. So from now on, I'm not going to write the whole list out. We're just going to write just the ones that are relevant. So this is in between 0.02 and 0.03. And on the number line, it's going to be closer to 0.03. And for that reason, we're going to round up. So this to one significant figure is 0.03. Something else that will help us when we are rounding is this number here. Sometimes we call it the decider, because it decides whether that 2 has to change and whether it rounds up or whether it stays the same. If the decider is 5 or above, so 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, if it's 5 or above, then it means that the digit that comes before it goes up and it rounds up. So let's look at another example here. So we'll come back to examples in a second. So in all the examples we've had one significant figure. Any zeros and decimal points were there just as placeholders. So here are some examples. These are all correct examples of rounding. So we can see the first significant figure is 8. That's in the hundreds column. So rounding to the nearest hundred is going to be 800. The first significant figure is 8. This is in the ones column. So rounding to the nearest 1, which in this case is 9 rather than 8. And then 0.6. This is in the tenths column. So we're rounding to the nearest tenth. So 0.6 or 0.7, and in this case you can see it's closer to 0.7. We do not add zeros after this because those are not needed. However, in this case, because it's to the nearest hundred, we do need to add zeros.